You're listening to X-Posure on Radio X. I'm John Kennedy, and that is the Mountain Goats with Rain in Soho from the latest album, Goths. And I'm very pleased to say that the man behind the Mountain Goats, John Daniel, is here. Hello, John.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good, thank you. It's great to have you here. I thought it'd be nice to start with Rain in Soho because we're kind of near Soho. It's been drizzling a bit outside.
Yeah.
And I thought it might make you feel at home.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like, it's funny, is like, I write these goth themes, but my tolerance for rain is so low, especially cold rain. Like, if I lived here in London, I'd be glowering all the time, like from like October until April.
Right. Durham, North Carolina, what's the weather like there?
It's the South. It's very hot. It starts to get hot around April, and then it's intolerably hot for most people from June through late September. I like it. I like really extreme heat. It's humid. It's very, very humid. It's not like where I grew up in Southern California. It's hot, but there's no humidity. So when the sun goes down, the heat goes away, right? And it becomes tolerable. In the South, sun goes down, it does not change the temperature of the air at all. Right, it's humid. It's almost tropical, and that's what it's like. And then the winters are fairly mild. We'll occasionally get a little dusting of snow, and then they shut down everything for 5 days. So, which was kind of funny if you have a day job, and then it's less funny when you have two kids and they cancel school for the entire week.
Right. So. Yeah. Nightmare.
Oh, it's totally. And it happens. You know it's going to happen. You hear the weather guy says, well, there's a 20% chance of snow, and you look at your wife or husband and you say, they're going to cancel school. They're going to do it, right? And then the email comes before a single flake. Well, the forecast is looking grim, so we're canceling for tomorrow and the next day. And then nothing happens. Like, there's a little dusting overnight. But the reason is they have to do it because nobody in North Carolina knows how to drive on snow. I lived in Iowa for a long time. They don't cancel school unless you get half a foot of snow, right? But that's because everybody knows how to drive on it. In North Carolina, the second somebody tries to go get gas, they go skidding across the road and crash into a house and stuff like that.
Yeah, they can't allow that kind of accident.
Well, the freeways shut down because people abandon their cars. It's hilarious. They just go, I can't deal with this, and they get up and walk away.
That's mad. So, Goths, were you ever a Goth, John?
Well, I wouldn't say, visually you wouldn't identify my style as goth. I ID'd sort of that way, but I was kind of picky choosy about it. Like, it wasn't often, I think, it's not like the houses of Hogwarts where, like, either you're all in or you're not. I was a big Sisters of Mercy fan, big Birthday Party fan, but I didn't consider that really proper goth. Sisters of Mercy I did, although they take issue with the term. I wasn't big on Specimen. The more cartoonish it got, the less I was into it. I wanted, and this is why I would consider myself like an actual, a true goth. It's like, I only wanted the stuff that was genuinely dark. Like, not the stuff that was into, the lurid, funny parts. I didn't want anything funny at all. I would consider myself a goth for that reason. But my dressing was, I wore a white Oxford buttoned all the way up to the neck always, which my friends would beg me to unbutton, and I would say no.
And this is in California? This is
Oregon and California. So white Oxford button all the way up, black jeans, and a blazer, which was a corduroy in California. And I got a darker one in Oregon. And then for about 9 months, I wore a hat with a lavender band and sunglasses that I never took off. Right, so I looked kind of like an Undertaker.
Fantastic.
It represented that I was in a pretty hard place in my life, that was the stuff I needed. But yeah.
Right. But it's individual expression.
Yeah.
Which is important. Which is important behind the whole concept of Goths in a way. It's meant to be individual expression until you break out of that individual expression and experiment in a way that isn't approved of. If you're part of any tribe, then suddenly it's like, hang on a minute, you're not doing it right.
Well, Goth expression was pretty loose. I think there was a lot of room for the more, the lacy, decorous stuff, but also for the strict, white shirt, black coat, black pants, black coal, a little tiny bit. Like, some people in the goth culture would go for the full-on Susie look, where it's like, you get some white stuff to really give yourself a corpse look. Me, I would put a tiny bit of rouge on my cheekbones, just enough to highlight that I have sharp cheekbones. Like, not a big splash of red rouge like Toya Wilcox or whoever, right? But so there's a wide range, I think, of goth expression, especially on the new record. There's a song with the West Coast, because West Coast goth is very different from Minneapolis goth, which is different from Florida goth, which is all different from the flagship here, right down the street, the Batcave, right?
Yeah, amazing. I mean, it's almost like you on one album. You've kind of done this dissertation on a subculture.
Well, I wanted to range. I didn't want to just talk about my stuff, and I wanted to look at. And the other thing is, like, now that I'm a professional musician, I think of it very differently. Like the Sisters of Mercy gig, I saw them twice on the Black Planet tour. I saw them at Fender's, right? And Fender's was, to me, a great place to go see a show. Get really close to the band, and actually the singer is out there smoking on the sidewalk, right? We goaded our most proper friend, the guy who's looked like a professor, to go go say hi to him for us, But now I know, well, why was he out on the sidewalk? Because there's no dressing room. There was no place for him to go, right? He wanted someplace to go stand and not, or if there was a dressing room, it was terrible, right? So he wanted to go outside. So it's a different sort of, my view on what the bands must have felt like and the things they must have been thinking about is different now. And so I had a broader view.
Yeah, and also it's interesting, the way that the whole idea of goth took off around the world. So you have
it took a long time.
Every single continent who were into that subculture.
Yeah, I think Trent Reznor gets a lot. I think he had been listening to a lot of that music, but he also was listening to Japan, and a lot of and I think probably a lot of dub. He was listening to stuff with big sonic vision, but also like Front 242. A lot of the what do you call that kind of music?
Industrial. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah,
I guess. So this is the thing. When I was a goth, we called industrial Einstürzende Neubauten and Test Department, right? And all these other bands, they were called industrial. So when industrial became the much more mechanical drum machine stuff, when I hear industrial, I think of guys with saws on stage, or blowtorches or whatever, not somebody with an 808 who's yelling like portion control guy or whatever, which is I think proto-industrial. So
yeah, it's interesting. The subdivisions.
I want if anybody else prior to this point in the year mentioned portion control on English radio, I got a pound for you.
Excellent. Let's carry on with another selection from the album then, which ties in partly to this discussion, which is for the Portuguese goth metal bands.
Yeah.
Now, it's an ongoing theme in your songwriting where you kind of make these references to particular groups of people or particular kinds of people in different ways. And the other song that has recently been covered in tribute to you, what's it being about, the death metal band?
Best ever death metal band in Denton,
yeah. So how do these things come up? I mean, are you daydreaming about Portuguese goth metal bands?
Well, no, I was listening to Sinistro,
right? Okay.
Who are a really super great band, and everybody should. I'm going to plug them. Go to Bandcamp and check out Sinistro, because Bandcamp is to me a great platform. You can listen to the whole record before you. It's really cool, right? I mean, Spotify's cool too, but Bandcamp is perfect. The band is there, and so Sinistro. I was listening to Sinistro. Hey, where are these guys? Well, they're Portuguese. And I thought of Moon Sorrow, a Portuguese. More metal than goth, but still a very gothy metal band. They do a lot of the vocal fry and the singing, the clean, right, kind of stuff, and I was thinking about how there seems to be some sort of goth thing over there that I know it does really well in South America, and I'm sure in the larger cities they draw good crowds, but they're not like they're not going to take off. I'm quite sure that the stops between the big cities on tour for them are a little trying. It's like, well, okay, we drew okay. I'm sure when they come to North Carolina and play Volume 11, Tavern's closed now, but that was where the metal bands would play. I'm sure they go, well, all 60 people here had a good time, But to come all the way from Portugal, that's hard, right?
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that because the music is very large, it's very grand, and it's expressing grand feelings. And the contrast between that and the little club environment and trying to make that little club hold that grand feeling and transform it for the evening. That's part of what music is about, right? It's like trying to take whatever space we're in and make it sublime, right? And and to me, that's a great work a band like Sinistro is doing.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, you're revealing an incredible knowledge of this stuff.
I'm a huge music fan.
Yeah.
This is just, I listen to music really closely as much as I can. I don't just have it going all the time. That's one of my old man complaints is like, I don't want music on in a restaurant. It's not doing anything for me there. It's just like making me have to talk louder and use up my voice, and so, but, God, what was I listening to this morning? Vivaldi, and I went, I was using the internet and listening as you do, and I went, stop looking at the internet for a minute and consider what you're listening to. I try and do that 4 or 5 times a day because it pays you back immediately. Whatever work you're doing, you come at it with added vigor and wonder for just being of this weird species that does so many terrible things, but that also makes music. Yeah. It speaks well of us that we continue to do that, right? Fantastic.
I love that empathy and sympathy you have.
Well, again, it's not to get all spiritual, but I can't take credit for it. Somebody else put that in me.
So here we are. Here's that empathy and sympathy in song form for the Portuguese goth metal bands, particularly Sinistro.
And Moon Sorrow is who I was also thinking of. Or Moon Spell. There's a lot of moon bands in metal.
Excellent. This is it. The Mountain Goats on Radio X.
Set the spectrum for the grayscale, that's better. Favorable fonts in black letter. Star-crossed lovers and their
It is the Mountain Goats with a selection from the new album Goths, which is out now. John Darnielle from the Mountain Goats is here to give us a bit more insight into the session they did recently. We'll talk about that in a minute, but also about the album Goths. And we just heard for the Portuguese goth metal bands. Now, for an album that is called Goths, John, it doesn't sound like a goth album, does it?
Just the first track, which is kind of a head fake, what they call in basketball, right?
Right.
That it's sort of, it sounds like that's what I'm going to do. But no, I didn't. I thought, you never want to be too obvious.
You might get success then.
That's the thing. It's like, that is, my wife and I talk about that. It's like, because people ask me, I listen to a lot of heavy metal. They say, when are you going to make a metal record? I have a shtick that I give. It's like, look, those metal musicians, they dedicate their lives to learning that music. I have a platform already and people like my music. It would be really disrespectful to music I love to go, hey, guess what? I'm going to sell a bunch of metal records to people by a band that's never tried. Although I still do think about it, but I would have to, like sometimes I try to practice making a sound or two in that, but it would take me a while.
Yeah.
But
how did you approach the music for Goths then?
So musically, what I'm interested in right now, I mean, it was almost all written at the piano. And it's been a long time coming toward that leap. I started doing stuff on piano. I started playing piano on record on Sunset Tree when I played the piano part. Well, I was over here when I was writing the songs, and I overdubbed some piano at Maida Vale on the first version of dance music we ever recorded. And Peter went, it's pretty good. I said, so thanks. And we got in to do the session. Franklin Bruno played most of the piano, but I think he was gone when we tracked Dino Lupati's Bones. So I went in and put some piano over it, and I was playing a fair number of 6s and 9s, and it came out real nice. And I thought we should pursue, and that's the only instrument I have any training on. So over the last 12 years or so, I've been, growing and getting better. And then on Beat the Champ, I really tried to write a song that was way above my pay grade, and it was Fire Editorial. And that was when we had to rent a studio to do what's called pre-production, where you go in and see whether you can actually record and play it in studio, so you don't wind up dumping a couple days trying to do something you can't do, right? But it worked. It was hard. I had to count on mic. Normally I like to do vocals live, but I had to sit there going da-dum, dum, 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 2, 3, 4, da-dum, dum, 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 right? And the chords are big and hard to play. So since Beat the Champ, I've been trying to grow in that direction. On this one, I really went for it with like modulations. There's a lot of songs modulating in different keys, and I think only ever happened in one other Mountain Goat song prior to this, and it only happened on the last chord on that one, right? But there's like 4 songs with mods, and there's different time signatures, and there's different chord structures, and I was just trying to challenge myself to grow. And thinking about how the goth bands, so when I had my theme and I also had my musical goals, well, the goth bands were strongly discouraged from growing, right? It's like both by their fan base somewhat, although I think the fan base is more open than we think they are, but certainly by the people trying to market their music, right? Your marketers do not want you to say, well, what if we stopped calling it any kind of genre? It's like, that's not a popular line among people whose job is selling records, right? And most goth fans who tried to grow did not wind up getting the chance. You lose your contract if you stop delivering to your base, right? And so I was thinking about that contrast.
Yeah, interesting. And when inspired by Sinestro and Moonspell for the Portuguese goth metal bands, what did you want to say and do with that musically? So
it was interesting. So that one was a lot of the chords in it. I don't know what their names are. Matt, my woodwinds guy, he totally knows. He went to music school. But I'm sitting at the piano playing chords that I go, oh, that sounds pretty good. There's a 5th in the left hand, and there's a major 7 and the 1 in the right hand of a different chord, right? And I was playing them. I have to write them out in these ridiculous, I could grab it from my backpack, these ridiculous cards that I make up that have my own instructions as to what to play. Not understandable to other people. So we went into the Rubber Room in Carborough to do a pre-production session to see if I can read my own stuff and learn how to do it. And it was supposed to just be a demo version, right, for us to use when we got in the studio, but it came out so nice that we wound up using that one as the basis and then overdubbing the woodwinds at Electrical Audio during the Rain in Soho session, which is where we tracked the basics for Rain in Soho and the first vocal, but not the final vocal and not the chorus, which was all done in Nashville. It was a year-long process getting the whole record together.
Yeah, wow. And a lot of traveling and
oh yeah. Well, we did it so Rain in Soho and Rage of Travers, which is sort of my secret favorite. We're fond of this record, but Rage of Travers came out pretty nice. John Worcester's beat is just sick as anything on that thing. But those were tracked between tour dates at Electrical Audio because the date was open. It's good to work. I like to work, and not every day off, but yeah, if you're on tour and you don't have anything going on, and Electrical Audio, a world-class great studio with one of the best mic lockers anywhere, is open. We thought, why not? And maybe we thought they were going to be pre-production, but we liked the tracks so well that we kept them and used them.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we're going to continue the conversation. We're going to take a quick break. We've got more from the Mountain Goats on the way. It is X-Posure on Radio X. I'm John Kennedy. And recently I caught up with John Daniel, the man behind the Mountain Goats. Earlier in the year, they put together some special session tracks for the show. I'm going to be playing a couple of those tracks. And I also had a nice catch-up with John when he was over here with the band to tour the UK. And I am playing out that conversation tonight. And it's time to resume that conversation by going back to the album Goths, the new album by the Mountain Goats, and another selection from it. This is We Do It Different on the West Coast. The Mountain Goats on Radio X. You're listening to X-Posure on Radio X. I'm John Kennedy, and that is the Mountain Goats with We Do It Different on the West Coast. It's another selection from the new album Goths, which is out now. John Daniel from the Mountain Goats is here tonight. I'm John Kennedy, and We Do It Different on the West Coast, John, that's continuing this exploration of
regional Gothisms.
Gothisms. And you've got personal insight to how they do it on the West Coast.
Yeah, so that's where I'm from, right?
Yeah,
And the bands out there were more rocking, and I have a theory that I've developed since I wrote the record as to why, one West Coast Goth bands, and Christian Death got big in the final analysis, but they were not that big when they were trying in their first flush. 45 Grave never got big. TSOL had a goth turn. It didn't really make that much noise outside of the West Coast. But I have a theory that if you listen to all those records, Christian Death records don't really start sounding good until they go record in France, right? TSOL records from back then do not sound so great, with no disrespect to TSOL. They all have this tinny sound, and I think it's because studio time is more expensive in Southern California, and the competition to fill it is bigger, right? Because that's where people go to record music. But see, this theory doesn't hold that much water because a lot of London goth bands, London studio time is legendarily expensive, right? However, the sisters are from Leeds, right? I'm quite certain that they were not paying top dollar for their sessions. And they wind up, but at the same time, they have time, whereas studio time is what's expensive, the time to actually sit with your stuff and listen to it and listen to it in playback and say whether it's right or wrong. You can't afford that if you're a young band in LA. You get your 8 hours or your 16 to make a whole record, right? And so West Coast Goth is sort of like a lot of good ideas that I feel are often executed pretty fast. And but also stylistically, just in terms of the dress and stuff, it wasn't as florid at all. I mean, the London goth scene grows out of punk, and that is, by the end of punk, people are doing Liberty spikes that take 4 hours to put up before you go out at night. And that look, the Batcave look, is very much a look at me and how I look in the club look. The West Coast look is more of an affective pose, I think. It has as much to do with sort of intimidating the onlooker as it does to do with wanting to attract their attention. It's maybe more of a different type of self-expression.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, one contradiction I always found difficult to deal with during that period was this idea that you kind of dress to get everybody to look at you, and then you complain when everybody does look at you. Because I had lots of goth friends, and they would make these comments that, why is everybody looking at me? And because you're not looking like everybody else.
But this is actually something that happens across all spheres of life, but we notice it most with that. But everybody's familiar with the phenomenon of, I wanted this thing for so long, and now I mainly complain about it. This happens, this happens to big rock stars on their second album. Always write songs about how much they hate being on tour, right? It's like, you worked your whole life to go on tour. That's what you were trying to do, was get out there, But I get it because, I don't really, because I'm really incredibly grateful for my job. But I mean, I complain a lot inside the van. I consider it unseemly to bring your complaints about your job that everybody wants outside of the van. It's like people ask, but but with something like that, it's like, I do think you want to be looked at. You think you do, right? But then when everybody's looking at you, maybe you would like to be able to control that a little more. You can't control what people do with with their attention if you have gone seeking it, and it probably is less pleasant than you think it is to get that kind of attention. So that's what I suspect is the dynamic there.
Yeah, it's a tricky business, isn't it? So a few months ago, you shared with us very kindly some recordings that we used as a session that took some of the songs from Goths and kind of reworked them or explored them in different ways. And one of the songs from Goths that I played a lot on the show, and it's got a excuse me, it's got a great reaction, is Andrew Eldritch is Moving Back to Leeds.
Yes.
And every time I play it, somebody inquires as to what it was or tells me how much they've enjoyed it. And the version you did for the session is quite different again and has a lovely jazz feel to it. And I thought it'd be nice while you're here to air that and explore how you recorded that and why. So you were just telling me as we're coming up to the studio that you made these recordings before the album, so it was kind of part of the...
No, so these recordings are after the album.
Oh, okay, right.
It was at the same place where we had done pre-production versions of goth metal bands, Rage of Travers, God, and I feel like there were two others that we did, Opiate Cocaine, and maybe Abandoned Flesh. But this one, we recorded at the same place where we did those, the Rubber Room, but it was after the album... I forget if it had already come out. It was right around that time. And we knew that me and Matt were coming over here, so we thought, what if we go in and start exploring how we play these together?
Because you added all these extra instruments.
That's Matt.
Yeah.
All those those are all Matt.
Multi-talented, multi-instrument.
Yeah, he's the best.
Just applying all this stuff. Because it does sound beautiful. And it's interesting, the contrast between part of the concept of Goths and some of the figures that you describe and talk about, and Andrew Eldritch is obviously a well-known figure within that world, and then you contrast that with the kind of music that you have created to go with the songs, and then it's further contrasted within this particular session.
No, it was really fun and interesting, because by the time a record comes out, the artist has listened to it so many times, right? You listen to the rough mixes. I've learned better than to listen too much to the rough mixes, because then you get attached to them, and the producer's going to do a lot more with those before they're done, and then you go, what happened to the cool thing I like now? And he said, oh, well, no, that was just rough. You let me do my thing. It's usually I am a very hard person to deal with, with that kind of stuff, so I didn't listen to the roughs, but the band did. The band was like flogging the roughs, burning them to CD and listening in the car, and so yeah, but by the time the album comes out, it's like that, those arrangements, to some extent, I've already spent my time with them, and now I'm interested to see where else they could go. They could go into smaller places, they go into darker places, they go into slower places or faster places. That's what live music is about. It's like for me, not trying to replicate what you made on the record. Why would you want to do that? You have the record. I mean, anybody does. In the digital age, you don't have to even buy it. It's out there, right? So you have it. So what you hear live, I want it to be better in some way. Better just because it's different, and so we were starting to look at how they would be different, and especially with this song, is like the sprightliness of the drums and everything. You got to go someplace different with it if it's just two people playing it. And so the me and Matt version is much more intimate, and it's musically very conversational between us two, which I really like.
Yeah. And so had you worked it out before you played it, or?
I'm trying to remember. It's been such a crazy busy year that I feel like we talked a little about it, and we showed up at the studio that morning, and I think we were still picking which ones we were going to do, because I had a thought. I wanted to do that one song, "We Shall All Be Healed," which is a song that sort of only exists momentarily. Like there's a longer story about that song that I'll tell, but I knew I wanted to do that and give you something that nobody else had, right? And so then the other ones for me, I was like, well, what will be the first ones we explore? And it was daunting to try and think about how to make these elaborate arrangements into two-person, largely live performances. So yeah, but I knew, Andrew Eldritch was feeling like the song that people were going to be looking at first, so I wanted to start playing around with that one.
Yeah, fantastic. And we get to hear that communication, which is excellent.
Thank you.
So here they are, the Mountain Goats. It's just John and Matt on this one, with Andrew Eldritch is Moving Back to Leeds.
There's indifference on the wind, but a faint gust of hope at a club nobody goes to, with a musty velvet robe, guys in motorhead jackets who knew him way back when. Haven't raised a drink in years, but now meet up again to remember how it was when they all thought they'd move away and ride in Lotus 7s through the London streets one day. Nobody ever gets away. Even the best of us come back someday to the unmarked rooms where the dry dust breathes. Andrew Eldritch is moving back to Leeds. There's a rusted fog machine in a concrete storage space. Letter number combinations with no meaning on its face. They won't make these anymore. It's a wooden coach and four. No one will even steal it if you leave it by the door. With no sign to mark it's going, no tombstone for its grave. There will be goodbyes by dozens, so practice being brave. No one anticipates the rush. The breezy feeling of the face, the scratch. At the ends of things where the salvage bleeds. Andrew Eldritch is moving back to Leeds. They don't throw him a parade. He just comes in on a train. One suitcase in his hand and an old army backpack from the Second World War, from a Leipzig secondhand store. Pick the keys up from the agent. Everything's been taken care of. No big changes in the roadways since you left that I'm aware of. A few old buildings gone to dust and some new ones in the way. They'll look just like the old ones when the winds have had their say. See the children bound for London, you'll all be back too. Everybody tests the membrane, but no one pushes through. Come on boys, that'll be enough. You'd think your old friends wouldn't play so tough. Like a basket by the Nile, hiding down among the reeds. Andrew Eldritch is moving back to Leeds.
Exclusively yours tonight, the Mountain Goats in session on X-Posure at Radio X. John Daniel from the Mountain Goats is here. Andrew Eldritch is moving back to Leeds, was the title of the song you just heard. Is this a fantasy about Andrew? Did he ever move back to Leeds? I mean,
I don't
have
know.
you ever met him?
We haven't met. Well, like I say, my friend Tom went up and said hi, and, and then he denied that he was Andrew Eldritch, and we were all, yeah.
And that was outside the club Fenders.
That was outside Fenders Ballroom in Long Beach, yeah.
Right, in Long Beach, California.
Which is the one mentioned in Paid in Cocaine.
Right.
And which is based on inspired by a Flesh for Lulu set I saw there. But no, so I haven't met him. I mean, I don't know anybody who has either, which is kind of awesome because, as you stick around the business, you usually meet people who've met people. I've met people who have had contact with Paul McCartney.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Eldritch, I don't know anybody who knows him, right? And actually, one of my favorite stories, we recorded with Eric Rutan, and I asked him about whether he's a death metal guy, whether he knew Chuck Schuldiner, the singer from Death, who's a legend, and he's dead now. And I said, did you know Chuck Schuldiner? And he said, I met him, but he didn't really hang around with anybody, which is like one of my favorite lines I've ever been to. Because he lived in the same scene, but I think he kept to himself. But I think Andrew Eldritch is the same way. I think he's close with his friends. That's the feeling I get. I mean, he's just a person. It's like Andrew Eldritch, when I say he's moving back to Leeds, there is no Andrew Eldritch, right? That's a persona. That's a stage name, right? And, but I also thought, he was world famous at one point. He was going all around. If you look at their tour schedule from back then, it's punishing, right? It's the sort of thing that chews people up. The young men come out of it, with all kinds of problems because they haven't had their feet on the ground in the same place for more than 3 days, and I thought, he used to talk up Leeds in his interviews. People would say, where do you like it? And he'd say, well, the only place I like in the U.S. really is Detroit, because it resembles where I'm from, which is Leeds. And he liked the industrial northern feel, and all that stuff. And he was big, a proselytizer for sort of, and this is a very Goth position, to like urban decay, to like big gray buildings, to like, not quasi-fascist, but that sort of look, that building look of the 50s in northern England. And so, but I imagine, eventually, I know he was stationed in Berlin for a while. I think he did time in China, or someplace like that. Maybe possibly Shanghai. But yeah, I thought, eventually I bet he goes home, but he's got friends there. I bet when he goes back, at some point he goes, look at us, we're 45. I played rock music all my life. Who would have thought that? When I was a college student, thinking about calling my band the Sisters of Mercy because it sounded evil. It's like he's got to have these moments, of lightheartedness. And I thought, that's what's true, about everybody, about Nick Cave, when people, or Glenn Danzig. It's why people got so excited when the picture of Glenn Danzig buying cat litter hit the web. It's like, well, there's the Prince of Darkness, and people would like the Osbournes to see Ozzy, just being a person. And that contrast is, I think it's really good for people to spend time with that contrast instead of thinking of the artist as a person who's like inhabiting that art all day. No, art is a thing you make. It's not what you are. It comes out of you, so it's weird in that way, that it is a part of you. But it's work, it's labor, and I think that's an interesting thing to think about. Humanizing the artist, for me, makes me love the art more, not less. I don't want Andrew Eldritch to have to wear his sunglasses all day.
Yeah, just for a few minutes at least.
For a couple hours.
And moving away from Goth, so in that session that we aired, there was this one song, We Shall All Be Healed, which you explained in the session was recorded, or written rather, around the time of the album of that title. Yeah. But it never emerged.
Well, the lyrics were written, and there were several pages of them. It was an attempt to circle an idea, like to get down to the real truth of the We Shall All Be Healed album, which is largely about 1985 and 1986 for me, when I was an absolute train wreck of a person, and I was on a lot of drugs. And there are people who got good stuff from me back then, but not many. I'm grateful that they remember me as somebody worth hanging out with, because I don't think that I was. I was a mess, and all kinds of it's an unpleasant person to reflect on. And there was a wounded person down at the core of that. But that time was dark for me, and I was taking a lot of speed intravenously, and I was a wreck. And when you go through that kind of experience in a place, I don't know about everybody, but for me, the place winds up being a totem of that, right? Like, we had a bad tour of Germany in '95. When I go to Germany, I still get that vibe that I got during the last 2 weeks of that tour. It was like, God, this tour is bad. I want to go home. Like, that's how I feel as soon as I go there and go to a gas station. I'm trying to have a good attitude about it, but it's left a mark. And in Portland, it has taken me years of touring to not start feeling anxious when I pull into Portland, to not start feeling threatened or afraid that something's going to happen, or I'm going to lapse into old habits, which of course I'm not going to do. I'm a grown up, But I still can't help myself from doing these sort of misery tours of going to the places where I was degraded or degraded myself, going to the places where I almost died, and looking at them. And one day I went to my old place on Broadway across from the Memorial Coliseum, and I walked and I stood in the entryway of this old building. It's like a 30s building. It's got a marble wall on the entrance, but it's not an expensive place. It's old, and somebody came out, and I just walked in like I still lived there. Right, it's a locked front door, but I just walked in, and there I was, and I went, whoa! It's like, it was very, very funny feeling to be standing in there for the first time since June of 1986, and this would have been like 2007-ish, I guess, 8-ish, and I went down and I looked at my door, and there was a scuff mark on there that I remember the weekend I left it there. I don't remember leaving it there, but I remember looking at it after the weekend and go, oh, looks like it was a long one,
Wow. That's amazing.
It was very intense. And so that's what this song is about.
But the title, We Shall All Be Healed, reveals hope, and, that we can come through whatever.
Well, it's a lot of my ideas about faith come from C.S. Lewis, and he talks about this hope that you can have, whether you believe it or not, you can still sit with that idea for a while of being perfected at some point, of all your flaws being revealed as, you know, as your own creation, as stuff that you did, and that the actual you that was made, that you were given when you were born, the spark that lives inside you, being the only thing that's left, and it's healed already. It's already healed and perfect, right? That's an idea worth spending a little time with. You don't have to believe in any afterlife for it, to believe that there's some, you know, always already, as they say in philosophy, right? Always already healed thing that's inside waiting to show you that the healing is already there.
Fantastic. Right, well, we're going to hear the song now. We Shall All Be Healed. This is the Mountain Goats in session on X-Posure Radio X.
1, 2, 3.
Left home in a blur, arrived in the light. Everything's going to be alright. Came back to the place where it all flared out, just to check if the reservoir still bore the mark of the drought. Up to 13th and Taylor, check my pulse. You weren't there, and neither was anybody else. Stared down demons, came back breathing. No real point in ever leaving. Tracy and Ivory and Brad and me too. We will see some great miracle before the night is through. Slipped in through the entrance, stood in the hall, left my fingerprints on the elevator wall. Went to my old room, stood outside it a minute, wondering if parts of me were still there in it. Who can say it won't be me? You are gone now and I am free. Wesley and Quinn and Devin and you, we will all be fixed up as good as new. Stared at the number 10 on my old apartment's door. There's one ghost that can't bite me anymore. And someday we will all feel at home in our new skin. And someday we will all never be alone again. When the sun comes up and the night has passed, we shall all be healed at last, at last, at last.
Goths with We Shall All Be Healed. John Darnielle has been my guest tonight. I'm John Kennedy, listening to Radio X. John, I'm going to let you go.
All right.
But
I'm having fun, I have to say.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So, I mean, Goths, what will be next?
I mean, I'm always working on stuff. I'm usually very, very reluctant to talk about it, but I will tell you that I was talking about composition earlier, and what I'm interested in right now is different time signatures, right? I wrote a song in 2 on the Jason Isbell tour. We opened for Jason Isbell for a couple of weeks, and I was writing songs in the bus, and I wrote a song called Divided Sky Lane, that was in 2/4, and then I double or triple tracked the vocals, and I sent them to Owen Pallett. Owen is an amazing musician, and he said, "Why does everybody sound like Elliott Smith when they play in 2?" It was like, and the thing is, he was right. And the other thing that was interesting about it was I double tracked the vocals, and Elliott Smith always double tracked his vocals, right? And so, but that was pretty interesting. Like, yeah, how can you do a song in 2/4, and not come out sounding like Elliott Smith? So I'm interested in different time signatures. Thematically, I'm not quite sure. I have another song about Bruce Lee that I wrote that I like pretty well. So a general theme hasn't opened up. I'm more interested compositionally in what I'm doing with songs. But I have a bunch. I have a whole bunch. I have a song. I have a Fake Meat Puppet song that I'm pretty excited about. I have a whole bunch I've been writing all year, but we'll see. I'm also always working on books now, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, it's so good to have you here and
thank you.
And be able to speak to you. Thanks so much for coming in.
Oh, it was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for, I mean, I hear on Twitter all the time that you're playing our music, and it means a lot to me. It's like, when you're young and listening to a lot of English music as a teenager, the notion that they might play you on English radio someday is a very, very distant dream. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. I like that idea.
Radio.